Hello, welcome to episode 2 of Ilex Syllable. I have been working away on reading the selection from the last video, which was the English Folktales by Neil Phillip, and I have made a little zine to talk about folktales, and that is what I have done. So let's talk about it. So first of all, the reading. So I have checked it a second ago, I'd say a good that far into the book. The first sort of 80 pages or so are a solid introduction. It's funny because I thought the whole introduction was written by Neil Gaiman, which I wasn't going to interact with, but it's actually only a forward, it's only a single page, and then there's a full introduction that contextualizes the work by the author. So that was really great. And I really enjoyed it, I have to say. I kind of called it about a couple of days ago. I'm about halfway through. It's very much a lovely reference book to pick up and read a couple of tales, but when you're kind of reading them sort of one after the other, it's a different prospect in terms of energy and kind of how much you want to kind of come back and keep reading it. Maybe in another time of my life I would have flown through it, but it's quite warm at the minute. I've been a little bit sick, so I am happy enough to call it where I've called it. And I've really enjoyed it. One of the, I suppose, concepts related to folktales that was refreshed for me reading this piece was how important and vital the work of collectors is for things like oral tradition, for things like music. I know the harp music in Ireland was collected in a very kind of notable way and preserved, I suppose, for future generations. So that's something that I think is really worthy, and there's a distinct body of work involved in, I suppose, people going out into the field and finding people who have these stories and recording them in their own voice as well. That's something I really loved about this book, was that they preserved a lot of the accents. So things like the spellings of things are very, you nearly have to read them out loud to get the sense of them in some cases, but I really like that. I think that's very true to what it should be, rather than trying to make sure everything's spelled correctly and grammatically correct, because that's not the spirit of it. The spirit of it is that, these are the voices of hundreds and hundreds of years of telling these stories. So one of the things, I suppose, that I was considering as I came into this was like trying to explain what a folktale is as opposed to a fairy tale. And it's funny, it's probably a more complex question than you might imagine, and that's something I ran into when trying to decide what I was going to do as a project, because folklore and the study of folklore, it's quite a dense topic. There are people whose whole career, whole academic sort of raison d'etre is to quantify these kinds of things and to be experts in the field. And I suppose the answer is it depends. And it probably varies depending on who you ask, and really I'm not the expert. I did do a bit of research when I was putting together my the zine, and I don't talk about the distinction there because I didn't really find something that I found particularly definitive, although I do have an expert in the field talking about what they consider to be within the realm of folk tales. But I mean, look, it's probably what you imagine that it is, which is anecdotes and morality tales and stories around the fire. It's probably quite broad as well in terms of, epics that last over 4 or 5 days, stories that would take 20 seconds to tell. It's a very wide reaching subject. So I found it lovely to dip into. And yeah, to kind of try and picture, even pull out the folktales that I would have come across as a child, and quantify those, and some of the things I considered in terms of what a project might be to go along with this video were asking people around me about the folktales that they'd come across and try to record them that way and honour that kind of documentation process and preservation process. I thought about narrating some folk tales from the book or from my own experience. I thought about making a little theatre and like a shadow puppet situation to kind of go along with this. And really what I ended up going for, which was the zine, which I'm going to put into the description box if anybody wants to download it. Look, it's nothing spectacular. It's a couple of pages long. And really was just so that I could say I had done something, and feel like this was a completed project. The reason that I went with that rather than the others was that I was having very big ideas but not a lot of big energy to go with them. As I said, it's quite warm at the minute, and yeah, what I really didn't want to happen was to set myself up for something that I wasn't going to finish, that I wasn't going to have the energy to want to start to do. I was just very much noticing where my drive was going, and what I didn't want to do was ultimately have this not turn into an episode 2, because I got stuck with trying to get something fantastic across the line. It is what it is. It's there. Sorry, I have the image here. That's the cover. Ta-da! Oh, I don't know how my hands work. Ta-da! There it is. And it's technically Brain Bees Volume 2, because I have made zines before, and I'm considering this the second in my zine series, but though they're not featured online as of this moment. But yep, this is my first digital zine, so that's a little element into my portfolio. So I'm very excited to spin the wheel and see what comes next. I'm not going to take the folktales off the wheel because I haven't technically finished it, but I do want to see what comes next. I would love something, because again, it's, you know, a couple of days into July, it's very warm. I would love something like a chapter book, basically. I would love something very gentle, something nice to read in the summer, but it'll be what it is. So let's spin the wheel and see what we get. Here we go. Ooh. Oh, gorgeous. Yes. Okay. Fabulous Woman on the Edge of Time. I think it's behind me. Okay. Have it. This is my copy of Woman on the Edge of Time. So this for me is a reread. I wouldn't say I don't have a lot of rereads on my shelf, but I think a book has to be very special for me to hang on to it. I've moved houses a lot with these books, so every time I move I go through things, and I'll either try and read things before I donate them or decide I'm, you know, passing them on to someone else. But that's in particular if I've read a book already. I will eventually kind of go, okay, I don't need this anymore. But Woman on the Edge of Time I read years ago, and then I found it in a charity shop and I decided I wanted to read it again. This book is beautiful. It is trying to just off the cuff describe it without giving away too much. It is a time traveling novel. It has elements of disparate futures based on what happens in the present, and there is an element of psychiatric care or non-care to it. So fantastic. I have no idea what I'll do with that as a project, but I'm very excited to read it. It's very been looking forward to returning to it, and it's gonna sound so silly, but like even the look of it, like I don't know if you can see that there, that to me looks like a book that smells nice. It's that kind of old paperback Yeah, it smells lovely. We've got a crayon or coloured pencil signed by a previous author. That's very sweet. And it cost me €4.40 in a second-hand bookshop in Torrox in Spain, I believe. Very exciting. Okay, well, I'm going to leave you there. Thank you for tuning in. Feel free to download the zine or don't. It is fine. Wouldn't say it's the most explorative work that's ever been done on Folktales, but the important thing is that it exists. So, you take care of yourself. Stay comfortable in the heat and alive in the rising fascism, right? And take care of the people around you, and you mind yourself. Thanks for tuning in.